we got some Halloween costumes here.
Nice. We got a witch.
Let's see who else. We're gonna have Clark Kent of the Daily
Planet leading our Q&A this morning.
He forgot to shave, but other than that,
he's in business. This is actually my Halloween costume from last year.
And I just, no one's doing Halloween this year,
so I had to use the same one as last year.
Nope.
Hi, Chris. Is that the actual
Chris Pratt there?
Yeah, I like the symbology. I take off the mask of Chris Pratt. Who's there? It's still Chris Pratt. So many layers to undo,
An ego behind the ego. Oh, it got us again.
Yeah. I just have more of a question about, I have quite a few people in my life that are close to me that suffer from a mental illness of some sort, and which I don't really think is that unusual. I think all of us have some degree of mental illness, right? We're trying to deal with, but that's what, like you said, Eckhart Tolle says, everybody's insane. The ego is insanity. So, and we're all dealing with the ego, right? But kind of along those lines, though, because I know so many people close to me, I feel like these tools, these techniques, this practice could really, just like it helps, diminish the ego, it could help diminish any of these mind programs, which in my mind, mental illness is just another program running in the mind. Mm-hmm. It's a very dysfunctional program running in the mind, but, and it's very tenacious, hard to get rid of, I guess, right? Yeah. Very, very common, just like the ego, I think. And maybe you'd say that mental illness is part of the ego. But my question is, if you think it's wise to try to use these techniques, to help your loved ones, and, they may be close to it. So I definitely, you can't push something on someone, but would it, and is this an effective technique for that? Would you recommend it? Have you come across any situations or where you wouldn't want to use it, or is it a good idea in general? Because I feel like psychology, the practice science of psychology, a lot of times they're only dealing with the mind, but they don't go into the higher aspects of the I am type of stuff. Although I think some concepts are touching on it, I think, but science wants to avoid the woo-woo stuff. So, so I guess I'm just trying to get your thoughts on using this to help mental illness, and because I'm thinking there's so many people who need it out there. I feel like mental illness is it might be the biggest hurdle we have, just humanity in general, the biggest hurdle preventing us from becoming more awake,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would certainly reinforce your point that everyone is insane, just to varying degrees. And something about realizing that is actually a very peaceful and liberating realization. It's actually when we think that the whole world is sane and that their behavior is normal that we really suffer from it. Because we say, oh, what a horrible, cold, cruel world we live in. Look at all these people doing these horrible things. This is the way life is. And the Course in Miracles says, actually, no, that's not the way the real world is. That's not God's reality you're seeing. That's ego's world. Everyone's acting it out. They're all insane. They need to be healed. That's why it's A Course in Miracles, right? It's about bringing the atonement, which is the correction of misperceptions. So a mentally ill person is just farther along the spectrum in one direction than most people are. So it's one medicine for everything, ultimately. But to your point as well, yeah, you can't force it on anyone, and there has to be a degree of openness or receptivity there. And if there's not, just a waste of your breath. But you can always try to give people some helpful pointers. And I think that the compassion in us always wants to help people. But if you really get in touch with, when you really get quiet, when you're in these situations with somebody, it's easier to tell, is there an opening here at all? And there's no one size fits all answer, right? Because it might look like someone isn't open, but something in your heart says there's some soil there to be planted. And So you might sow a seed and say, give them an idea about meditation or self-inquiry, and they react volatile and they get angry and triggered. And the ego's like, oh, whoa, huge mistake. You shouldn't have gone there. But again, beingness isn't concerned with the reaction. It's just concerned with sowing the seed. Whatever the reaction is up to them. And then 3 days later, they might come back to you and say, hey, when you told me about self-inquiry, it really triggered me because I felt like you were insulting my mental illness or whatever. But then I thought about it, and all of a sudden this question arose, like you said, who am I? And I just got really quiet. It was very peaceful. I just wanted to say thank you. Like, that's happened to me before. So for that reason, I say, don't look at the external evidence of like, oh, this person's really in a triggered mood or they're really not. That stuff can't actually tell you the level of receptivity that person has. Only your inner being knows. So it's like, just keep quiet within yourself. And if there's an impulse to share something, it'll stay there. And it won't be, your mind won't be rehearsing what to say, right? That's ego doing it, but there'll be in the heart, there'll be some drive that wants to share something, and just stick with it for a while. If it's still there, then go ahead and share it. And that's sort of my first maybe pointer to your question. The second one, in terms of does this stuff help people with mental illness? I've only worked with one person in my short time counseling this last year who had BPD, borderline personality disorder. So I was working with somebody who is working through BPD, and it was really causing tremendous suffering, destroying their relationships. And so my practice with them was to try and get them to contact the sense of I am as often as possible, which is really the point of self-inquiry. And the reason that this works, the Hindus call it one medicine for everything, is because the mind wants to label and judge everything that has some kind of objective quality. Anything that can be perceived, the mind wants to know it and label it and slot it away in its memory spank, right? I know what that is. I control the world. It's all at my fingertips because I know it. So when we do self-inquiry, we say, who is aware of my thoughts? And there's that resonance, I am. There's an I that knows it is aware. And when we get we're trying to sort of, in self-inquiry, we're trying to sort of trick the mind into looking at the sense I am like it would look at an object. But when the mind turns inward and looks at the sense I am, it finds there are no objective qualities there. Like it can't deny the existence of I am, but it can't find anything to label. And so something about that seeing, maybe we could say, shows the mind that there's something earlier than the mind, or it shows the mind that it's not the ultimate reality. So maybe it's safe to give up this need for control. I don't really know exactly why the mind responds the way it does, but when we kind of here, mind here, over here, I am, and the mind goes, what? Who is I? And it looks at I am, it disappears. Ramana said it goes back to its source into the heart and is destroyed. And we call that the state of silence. And so for maybe, 10 seconds, a person will experience a very quiet, open vastness that they feel is peace. They feel very loving and connected with everything, a oneness experience, whatever might happen. 10 seconds goes by and then the mind boots back online. Whoa, what was that? That was a near-death experience. Let's get back to labeling. And it goes back to its normal functions. So we tell people, just remember I am as often as you can. Keep contacting the sense of I am. And every time that the mind looks at I am and vanishes for a moment, the way I like to phrase it is that I thought, the I this, I that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, gets a little bit less sticky, if that makes sense. So when the mind resurrects itself out of the heart and goes back into identification and all that, the I thought, which identifies with everything and labels with everything, is a little bit less sticky. So it sticks to the objects a little bit less strongly than before. The weight of identification is a little bit less, diminished. So the person notices, like my client with BPD would notice that it was still getting triggered, but the sort of like the steam was being taken out of it. Like, oh, what's the point? For who? For what? I'm just going to get angry again. What does that ever accomplish? These kind of recognitions begin to happen on their own as the intensity of the identification with the thought and the emotion is gradually relinquished, and that I thought can't really stick as much to those things. And there's this increasing sense of abiding in the self, in the I am. And the analogy I gave a few weeks ago that I just love because it's so perfect in terms of like the way I've experienced it is that analogy of the bull in the stable. And the bull is like going out of the stable into the city to find grass to eat. And it's like wrecking through shops and bashing everything to pieces, right, to try and find grass. And so you're going, here, bull. And you have a little handful of grass. Come back to the stable. And it comes back to the stable and you feed it. And it goes, oh, yum, thanks. It turns around and goes back out and blows up more parts of the city. But gradually, as you keep feeding that bull the grass in the barn, the bull just begins to learn, hey, I have all the grass I need in here. Every time I go out there, I get into trouble. In here, it's nice and warm and safe, and I'm well fed, and there's really no reason to leave anymore. And that bull just starts to stay in the barn more often. And that remembering I am just, there's not even a concept of it anymore. You just are abiding in the self. Ramana called it self-abidance. You're just enjoying that fragrance I am, and you just don't see a need or desire to attach to anything because everything you want's already inside you. And so it's really the simplest practice that you can teach anybody. You can walk down the street and interview random people who've never heard of spirituality or whatever and say, hey, are you aware? And let's say, yes, I am. Like everyone knows I am. So it's about just getting them to find I am and just say, hey, all your problems actually can be solved by just looking at that sense I am as often as you can. The more our attention turns away from objects and towards the subject, the more purified and refined and loving and peaceful consciousness becomes. And that's really the only practice anybody needs. But again, they have to be open to that, right? If there's a lot of identification with, which is really trendy right now, to be hyper-identified as a victim, people are labeling their defense mechanisms right now as almost like a badge of honor, rather than seeing it as, oh, this is a problem that needs to be solved. They're like, no, not only is it not a problem, I want you to call me this, see me as this. This is my blanket of protection, this victim badge. So if that's where somebody is, there's definitely not an opening, right? But only you can know that in the moment. So that's kind of how I would navigate around that one. It's a bit of a sensitive subject because, again, some people will say, oh, even to try and fix someone's mental illness is to oppress them or whatever.
Yeah.
So you've got to be sensitive to those kind of things too.
Okay. Well, thanks. It's very helpful. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to take this course, actually. I mean, I think just being able to just the possibility of maybe being able to help somebody and would be great, you know. I feel like that it's weird how this 2020 thing is just it's exaggerating the need for it. It seems like the mental illness is coming out of the woodwork. Just
oh yes, we're seeing it in full force, huh?
Yeah.
But we need to see it. We really do.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, it's even that's for our good, right? Ultimately.
Absolutely.
Even the mental illness is there to help us through, to learn and grow.
You got to see it if you're going to heal it, right?
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Chris.